Snow Forecast Gold Standard Road to 10,000 followers starts with you as we continue to look at this developing winter storm now, as we're within 48 to 52 hours, as 7 a.m. Wednesday at 12Z today is about 48 hours away. And that's about when the northernmost flank of the northeastern quadrant of this developing winter storm is going to start getting into extreme southern lower Michigan from about Detroit to Jackson and point south. Just very light snow around the 7 a.m. If anything, if this is even reaching the ground up here, and the heavier snow is back out into here, into eastern Missouri, southern and central Illinois, and spreading its way off to the east. And here's why I'm continuing to think that we're going to get a developing East Coast low pressure start to develop here off the Virginia coast and track its way northeast, like this previous storm that is currently still up into New England right now taking place. And that's why this front lead area of snow, they call this the warm conveyor snow, as the warm moist air from the Gulf gets thrown up over top of cold air at the surface and cold air draining in from the north, right, with that big Arctic high up there. Most of that snow here is going to shear its way off to the east, right, and it's going to miss southeast Michigan. And that's going to put down about 3 to 6 inches of snow within that area. And then the main area of snow for us is on the north and northwest side of a developing low pressure system that's going to be sitting over western Kentucky at about 7 a.m. Wednesday morning, tracking northeast, nearing or very close to the benchmark for southeast Michigan and metro Detroit, right? A surface low like I've been talking about that tracks in out of the southwest to the northeast through western Kentucky and approaching the Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, where they all meet right there on the Ohio River, and then continuing northeast at over or near Columbus, Ohio, and into the central and eastern end of Lake Erie, approaching the western shore of Lake Ontario, is the most bullish and climatological benchmark, a track like that, for Metro Detroit, because that puts you about 150 Paul Gross's rule about the former retired great meteorologist out of Channel 4, Paul Gross, used to say about 150 miles north of the surface low pressure is where the heaviest snow is going to fall. And that's exactly on a benchmark over Columbus, Ohio. We're about 150 miles north of there, and that puts you on the northwest side of the storm and gives you heavy snowfall. But unfortunately for this storm, the limiting factor is most of the snow that we get is only going to be on the trawl or the deformation side of the system. We continue along here into the storm's progression. Now we work our way from 7 a.m. Wednesday to 1 p.m. in the afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. And you can see that first area of snow that we were talking about has worked its way east over towards the east coast. And this group of moisture here has that developing east coast storm, I think, is going to take off here. But now you got the surface low pressure that is just east and south of downtown Indianapolis at about 996 millibars working its way to the northeast. Actually, by looking at this, it looks like more like the low pressure is actually down into here, but it's tracking its way northeast. And now by 1 p.m., the moderate snow line has made its way up to Port Huron in the I-69 corridor, back out to Flint, and then down its way towards the Benton Harbor and the Jackson and the Lansing area. You're in the moderate snow, and then even some heavy snow has snuck in along the extreme Indiana and Ohio border, Lenawee, Monroe, and Hillsdale counties, working its way near Jackson and Ann Arbor down to the city of Detroit and sneaking up the east side already by 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday. And there's probably been an inch or 2 inches of snow already in this area, right? And notice how areas that were getting heavy snow earlier, as the warm air continues to lift up, as the surface low gets closer, and then out to the west of the areas that it was snowing, it has now changed over to light rain and drizzle, and they start getting melting and compacting and all kinds of nonsense. And the heaviest snow continues to track in through northern Indiana and central Indiana, northeast, and transfers over into southeast Michigan by about 1 p.m. It's making its way into the metro Detroit area with a stiff northeast wind, because that big area of high pressure is up there about 15 to 25 miles an hour, not too extreme. A little bit of blowing and drifting, but sort of a wetter snow at the beginning will limit that. And temperature is about 30 to 32 and slowly falling Wednesday night. Will make it more of a wetter snow, similar to what the snowfall was on Sunday, just more accumulation on the roads, as we've had a couple of days now of colder temperatures and have allowed road conditions to cool and get closer towards the freezing. Approaching the 7 p.m. hour on Wednesday afternoon now. We're in the heart of the storm now. Between 4 p.m. and about 9 p.m. will be the heart of the storm for southeast Michigan. And you can see a surface low pressure here that's actually centered right about here, right over the center part of Lake Erie, worked its way from just southeast of Indianapolis. It's a very good historical storm track for southeast Michigan. As the other day we were ironing out a track somewhere in here, we now are being able to iron it out a track somewhere in this region. That surface low is going to track somewhere in there. Right in the middle of that over Columbus, Ohio would be the best possible outcome for southeast Michigan. But all the data at the 12Z continues to show this. Around 7 p.m. Wednesday, there's been about 3 to 5 inches of snow already on the ground and still snowing in the heart of the storm, where you got winds gusting to 25, maybe 30 miles an hour, a northeast wind. Eventually, as the storm pulls away, there's going to be a northwest wind come in, and then you might get some lake effect snow showers here. And I've had some questions. There is a potential for some lake enhancement, especially northeast, right along the shoreline, right? You could get a little lake enhancement. I've seen this on a low pressure track here, where you even sneak it all the way down into northern Macomb County and eastern Lapeer County, where you get some lake enhancement right up into this area, where you get more than everybody else just because of that lake enhancement. And that is possible as the low pressure continues to track off to the northeast during the mid and late part of the storm, until the storm flips the winds around from the northeast back off to the north and then the northwest. It will shut that lake enhancement down. But the first half to 3/4 of the storm, the winds will be out of the northeast. And I think this is going to relatively be a pretty good snowstorm for Metro Detroit this year, as we haven't had very much snow. I think there's been about 7 or 8 inches at Metro, and you might get pretty close to that 5 inches of snow out of this at Metro, to where you might get your whole seasonal snowfall to date in one snowstorm. We'll continue to monitor this, because any adjustments of the track, say the track tracked slightly farther north and got just south of Toledo like that, that would put the heaviest snow band back off, displaced about 50 to 75 miles farther to the northwest, and would leave it somewhere in there as the heaviest snow. And conversely, if it tracks a little bit farther south and comes up along the Ohio River and tracks something like that, that would displace the heaviest snow a little bit further to the southeast of Metro Detroit, right? But right now, 48 hours away from the storm, things seem to be holding as we thought from a couple of days ago. A widespread 3 to 6 inches of snow in southeast Michigan. Like, subscribe, and share. Peace.